Almost every month we are hit with several new gacha releases which generally fit into one of four boxes: the breakout success, the niche, the wasted potential, and the dead on arrival. For anyone who's really gotten into the gacha space, you could likely name several games that belong in each box. Today's topic is about one of the wasted potential games that we knew from day one would never be a mainstream staple, but it had a strong foundation and was genuinely a fun side game that had a stable, dedicated player base, originally looking to be in the niche category. Unfortunately, the road looks very different today, so with that being said, let's talk about what happened to Silver and Blood. Today's video is going to be split into two main parts. First, we'll talk about what Silver and Blood is, the gacha, the content in the game, and the early days of the game. Then we will cover what the game is like today and its current situation. Now, contrary to how that opening may have sounded, Silver and Blood is still online and receiving updates. It is a top-down, gothic, vampire-themed gacha which released globally on June 26, 2025. The game did well in its opening months and quickly gathered a community of players. This is also despite the lack of marketing the game received, with many people only hearing about the game the day of its release. Many of the systems in the game are incredibly similar to Nikke, to the point it would be referred to as Vampire Nikke, since at times it really did feel like a reskin of sorts. That being said, this wasn't a bad thing by any means, considering a lot of great systems were brought over. Because Silver and Blood is a gacha game, let's start with the gacha system. There are no rare characters, only SR and SSR units. However, as you might expect, only the SSR units were ever worth using outside of incredibly specific situations, though this would never be an issue. Along with a couple of free selectors, the base rate for an SSR is 4%, a significantly higher rate than many of the mainstream gachas, with a hard pity of 60. When you get an SSR, there is a 50% chance you get the rate up unit and a 50% chance you get something from the standard pool. While you can lose 50-50 multiple times, after the first time you lose, all future losses will be ancestors, which are incredibly strong and this game's version of pilgrims in Nikke. We also have ancestor banners, which only have a 25% chance to be rate up, but they are guaranteed at 120 pulls, so can actually be easier to obtain than some of the non-ancestor units. It also turns out to be a good chance to get dupes and other units you don't have yet. Now, a lot of people are gonna hear no guarantee on non-ancestor banners and 25% rate up for ancestors and immediately disregard the game. And I wouldn't blame you at all. But as a completely free-to-play player, despite getting scammed on multiple banners, I owned every single unit, all with multiple copies, and consistently placed highly, even top 50, in all leaderboard content, and here's why. While there is no guarantee for the rate up outside of ancestral banners, it is genuinely rare to not own close to every single unit in this game. The game is very generous, with events giving away lots of pulls and premium currency, and every few banners you would be given the SSR for free just from playing the game, such as Albrecht, Cyrene, and Julius, all of which were meta relevant during their release, being used to secure top spots on the leaderboard, with Albrecht still being at the top of today's meta. Another source of pulls is the faction towers, where each day you can make progress on certain towers depending on the day, each dropping guaranteed shards which can then be used to get a random SSR for that faction. At this point, it's worth noting that every couple patches, previously rate up SSR units would be added into the standard pool, which means they are obtainable from these tower shards and various selectors and upon losing your 50/50s. There is also a wish list on the standard banner where you pick 5 units from each faction, and whenever you obtain an SSR, it's guaranteed to be one of the units on your wish list or an ancestor. A small caveat to that is there are some true limited units such as Fleeting Bella and Timeless Aiona, and some units are redeemed by obtaining enough guild or PvP currency. Yes, there is PvP, yes, we will talk about it, no, it is not good. All of that along with endgame currency and leaderboard rewards, and you can start to see why owning every unit was actually easy, and for a new player starting today, it's easy to obtain a lot of meta units. Despite the mediocre pity system, having those high rates, having units added to the standard banner, the ancestors on repeated losses, and the large amount of income, it actually made the game's gacha much more fair and player friendly than most current day gachas, and leaderboards were less about missing out on meta units and more about having good ultimate timing. And looking at what CN was doing to copy that ultimate timing, but we're getting off track. So for a video called What Happened to Silver and Blood, this is kind of starting to sound like more of a sales pitch, so let's run over the content of the game so that we can get to where we are today. As I mentioned earlier, the game is similar to Nikke, so if you've played Nikke, you'll quickly notice the similarities here. The first piece of content that players will want to push through is the main story. Now, to give credit where credit is due, the story of Silver and Blood is decent. You mostly play through the lens of Noah, a so-called heretic who is set to be burned at the stake for his alleged crimes related to the spread of a disease known as the Black Blood. Upon being saved by Impuza, you are taken to meet her family, most notably Cain and Lamia, a race known as Bloodborns. You learn about their ability to resurrect, their internal struggles, and their mission to return to the moon. Throughout the story, you go on a mission to discover who you were before waking up the night of your execution, and unlike most Amnesia stories, you do genuinely learn about your past, and it becomes something you need to come to terms with. It's not some random throwaway detail that maybe gets brought up, it's one of the major plot points and has a large domino effect on the story. Also, I need to highlight the music in this game because I'm gonna be honest, in most games I have the music on during story related moments, but for the day-to-day gameplay I have it completely muted. But dude, listen to this menu music. It's worth noting as well that every single event came with multiple of these animated backgrounds, all completely free to earn. There's around 28 in the game at the moment, and they all come with their own unique menu music that is just as good as the two that I just played. Honestly, I didn't really know where to talk about the music, so it's going here. Honestly, you should go out and listen to some of the music that is in this game because it is absolutely amazing, but let's get back to talking about the actual content. Beyond the main story, you have events with every banner, also having their own stories, not required to understand the plot, but shining a light on characters that don't have as much relevance to the main story. These have hard mode stages and farmable stages where the event-specific currency is used to buy pulls, premium currency, and other resources. For permanent content, you have Infinite Abyss, the tower mode mentioned before to earn more SSR units, Time-Worn Mausoleum, which is a fairly short, somewhat roguelike mode where you kill several waves of enemies for skill level up materials that you will farm once a day. Tomb of the Fallen is a boss fight mode for gear and gear leveling materials as well as substat re-rolling materials. You only need to fight this once a day, at which point you can skip and claim the rewards 2 more times each day. Dutchman's Revenge, which are basically puzzle stages for artifacts that you can think of like equipable passives for your units. I used to post the solutions for these here on the channel when I still played actively. Even though they aren't really difficult, it's nice to just turn your brain off and see the solution. If I wasn't making the videos, I would have been the one watching the videos. We also have Blood Arena, which is the PvP mode. It's not RTA, but it is horribly unbalanced, and new units only made it worse. Let's just say no one was playing this game because of its PvP. Can you hit number 1 on the leaderboard as a free-to-play? Genuinely, yes, and for a while I was competing in the top 5. But was it fun? Not at all. At some point, Void of Shadow was also added, a mode in which you fight a boss for a new currency that allows you to level up your units. Not this number here, there's a new system where you go into your duplicates menu and you have another leveling system within here. If we're being honest, this content got repetitive very quickly since none of it was very hard and it was designed to be farmed quickly. So when you've pushed all the story, farmed all the daily stages, where do you go? Well, that's where we get Guild Hunt, Night of the Hunt, and Prophecy. Noth and Prophecy are both time-limited modes that have a leaderboard, with Noth putting the player base into smaller groups and Prophecy just having one server-wide leaderboard. Noth would have 5 stages, 1 stage per day, then on the weekend all stages would stay open. The great thing about Noth is that across the 5 stages you would often use at least 3 distinctly different teams to take advantage of the available buffs, and depending on if the stage was single target, multi-target, or wave-based. There was no requirement to use different units, but it was the right thing to do in the vast majority of situations. Prophecy was just about how much damage can you do to a single boss across 3 separate teams. A lot of people dislike leaderboard content, and I get why, but with how available the entire roster is, and as someone who was beating teams of max duped units, as a free-to-play, skill timing was way more important than swiping. Guild Hunt is a mode where you have 4 stages that the whole guild contributes towards fighting every day, and each member has a set amount of daily attempts. You can also practice these stages without using attempts, though of course you don't keep the score either. Ideally, you would want a full guild of members who could one-shot their stages every day, though this was often unrealistic, so stronger players who are committed to playing well would one-shot the full health stages, while letting the more casual players auto stages that were left at low health. This mode also had a leaderboard based on how many waves the guild could take out. So now we have a pretty cohesive overview of what the game has to offer and can finally talk about the issues, starting with a single unit that people probably knew was going to be brought up from the moment they saw the title, and that unit is Timeless Aiona. So here we go, we have enough to pop both, so we're going to do that. This is going to break the Frenzied Wolf Spirit, use Aiona as well. Yeah, she hurts. This phase is already over. We are then going to pop another one of these, as well as Cyrene. We're going to try to get this sword out. There we go. And pop another Fleeting Bella. Okay, his shield has gone. Good, good, good. And then we're going to go into the final phase here. Pop another Timeless Aiona, another Acapella. And, yeah, so that's Clive. But for context, this account literally yesterday was struggling to do these fights. Not even getting to second phase. Like, we were dying in that first, like, wolf pack attack. And now he's dead. And here's the damage. If you want to know, that's 2.3 million off of a Timeless Aiona 444, no levels on her tier 7 non-faction gear, and a level 4 Eye of Truth. It's kind of disgusting. Timeless Aiona was released on the 7th of August 2025 and was, at the time, the most unhealthy thing in the game that turned everything into a joke. The addition of her alone didn't help you push a couple stages. This was pushing a couple chapters in a game that at the time had less than 15 chapters total. She not only spawned in with a chunky shield, but all healing was converted to shield. Damage was converted to shield, and this shield capped at 200% of her max HP. Why does this matter? Well, above 50% shield, her attacks are now triple attacks. At 100%, her attacks do extra damage based on the enemy's max HP. When she uses her ultimate, she gains 4 more attacks, targets multiple enemies, reduces basically every enemy's attack speed, and this lasts for 12 seconds. Sorry, did I say 12 seconds? What I actually mean is permanently, because with proper use of acapella and good skill rotation, she could ult back to back for as long as she wanted. Oh, and just for fun, she does more damage the further away she is from enemies while having essentially map-wide range. Please refer to this tier list from SG back when she was released. This was not a joke. Now, part of her strength also came from the existence of Fleeting Bella and, to some extent, Acapella and Cyrene, but she did not need them at all and was perfectly self-sufficient. The entire PvP meta revolved around how fast can Aiona ult, and most matches were just whose Aiona will ult first. In one of the PvP modes, ult order is randomized and forced auto, so people would intentionally use an SR unit called Clive Jr. Why? Well, Clive, Gilrain, and Bella could all summon a friendly unit, and you would give them all this artifact, which gave a blood point when summoning. This allowed you to start with 3 more blood points at the cost of needing to run 2 units that weren't good and would likely die. But that's fine, because they aren't Aiona, so their life is meaningless. So now let's look at what this does to a game. Player versus player is now Aiona versus Aiona. Story? All cleared because of Aiona. Daily stages? All one-shot by Aiona. Events? Wiped out by Aiona. Leaderboards? Just look at this. This was my prophecy damage that placed me 21st on global. 10 million damage from the damage over time team. 11 million damage from the AoE team. 94 million damage from the Timeless Aiona team. And no, these units aren't actually level 1, everyone's level is scaled up, it's just not shown here. The point being that your other 2 teams basically didn't matter as long as you optimized your Aiona team. And again, this is a free-to-play account with 1 dupe of Aiona, the max dupes being 10, which should also show you that being a whale still required a level of skill and dedication if I'm placing this high. This essentially forced other units to also be ridiculous, or for content to cater so heavily to other playstyles that Aiona wasn't quite able to keep up. Even though Prophecy and League PvP needed multiple teams anyway, it still heavily impacted those modes, as shown by the leaderboard scores before. So then, what's actually left to enjoy? The PvP sucks, the story is good, but this isn't Heaven Burns Red, or Limbus Company, or Arknights, or even Peak Honkai Impact 3rd. On top of that, the voice acting was never up to date with the story. During the release, Chapter 6 was missing tons of voice lines, and by Chapter 7 and 8, there was no voice acting whatsoever. They would eventually add the voiceover for these chapters, but by then, new chapters were already out and had no voiceover, something that is still an issue today. To be fair, all events were fully voiced, though they occasionally had issues with the voiceover and on-screen sentence being different. I don't mean like a word or typo. Literally, the next text box would be the words for what was said during the previous box. I don't know if that's still an issue, but it used to be at least. Now, before we get to one of the biggest things that's killed the game, I decided to reinstall the game and see what it's like after being away for a while. Upon logging in, the music really did hit me with a wealth of nostalgia that I wasn't ready for. Seeing all my units there and getting to use them again was genuinely fun. I did some story, which Aiona completely destroyed on auto, not exactly surprising. Though what was surprising was the current state of Tomb of the Fallen. I was playing when the advanced mode was released, but we only had Crypt of Doom. These are similar to the normal mode, but with better drop rates and each boss having a specific gear piece that they drop tier 9 tails for. These aren't a cakewalk, and I admittedly got my ass handed to me. Using an OG dot team on the new boss who is recommended to use dot against, I was only doing around half their health before running out the clock on the lowest level. At first, I was still having fun trying to find ways to optimize my damage and rotation, until it hit me that these are synergies. This gives up to 50% damage to all synergy members and another 40% per stack of continuous damage, which is wild. But this isn't a faction buff, no. This is a harem buff. You see, to actually benefit from these, you must use the Oathsworn unit, in this case, Blooming and Puza, whose kit we won't get into, but it's like if Darcius and Transcendent Hati had a child with range, piercing damage, and a synergy-wide death ignore that also buffs her just for good measure. The reality is, this team was never going to kill that boss. You can't even use Agnes ult to group the enemies that share health with the boss for more scaling. Does this technically buff old units? Sure, but it still requires using the new unit. Some old units aren't even part of any faction. Finally, something that Aiona can't take advantage of. Want to use Dalcalo and Lamia again? Sounds good. Oh, but you don't have Alexi? Too bad, back in the forever box they go. Oh right, but units go into the standard banner pool after a patch or two, right? Oh no, but not these. You get Letitia, and that is it. Now, am I dragging things a little out of proportion? Yeah, maybe. But when you look at where we started and where we are now, you start to see the shift in priorities. We don't get Noth or Prophecy, but we have another arbitrary currency to make number go up on our gear because having one tab of substats wasn't enough. We have another leveling system on our units that use another new currency. Oh, and I didn't mention dupes because they are just stat increases. Except now some duplicate breakpoints say Soul Echo will be available in a future patch, so fuck knows what they're gonna do with that. So while editing that section, I decided to go take a look if any characters had their soul echoes yet, and when looking at Transcendent Hati, she does have hers already, and it's exactly what I was worried it was going to be, which is additional passives based on how many dupes you have. I hate when they do this in gacha games, and I was really happy that it used to only be minor stat increases like you can see here, but no, at dupes 1, 3, and 9 of all dupes, you do now get additional passives, which you can level further by leveling up this middle section here, so that's great. It's frustrating because there's just no need for it. These are all artificial growth systems that do nothing to benefit the game or the player experience. You would get the same experience if you played Cookie Clicker and reskin the cookie to be an anime waifu. Oh, and by the way, there's this bug where stat icons don't show up, it's been there since day one. Are we even playing our own game? Now, even though a lot of these changes and additions are frustrating and constantly getting further from the game we loved, those things alone wouldn't necessarily kill a game. So what did? Well, firstly, what I've done is lied to all of you. Kind of, let me explain. So I mentioned that they would give out free SSRs, which was the second half banners of each patch. Though from digging through multiple previous patch notes and seeing this comment, it seems like that's no longer a thing they do and hasn't been for at least like 5 patches now. I mentioned Noth and Prophecy being decently fun endgame modes, but according to this comment on patch notes from 3 months ago, these modes haven't even happened since last year. The in-game event calendar currently shows nothing, and the event preview tab also shows nothing. The official Twitter account also hasn't posted anything for about a month now. Something you might be aware of in all gacha games is why dailies exist. Essentially, it's a psychological tactic to get you to sign in every day and to feel bad when you miss a day. When you think back to why you quit gachas in the past, I'd be willing to bet that some of them didn't even do something that made you quit, but rather you just didn't log in one day, and then after a week or so of missing a couple days here and there, you just never logged in again. Well, around January 21st of 2026, the North American servers went on maintenance to update their infrastructure. Essentially, from what I could tell, there was meant to be a server merge with the EU servers to just have one giant global server. In-game, there was a notification stating that this would last about 5 days. Now, this is already enough for people to not bother coming back, but 5 days later, there would be an official post that would essentially destroy any of the remaining player base in North America. Due to unforeseen changes in operational procedures and the complexity of cross-region coordination, the duration has exceeded our expectations and we are currently unable to launch as scheduled. Estimated resumption time, TBD. So, what, was it down for like a week or two? 7 weeks later, on March 11th of 2026, with no official announcement, servers in the US would finally be back online. At which point they almost immediately went back on maintenance, which was also extended, but that was an actual update, servers really did come back online. Even though the servers were up, the game would remain unavailable on the App Store for some time, leading players to believe the servers weren't even meant to be back up yet. considering there was no official announcement, no in-game compensation, and people reported bugs with UI and general navigation of the game's menus. It's hard to come back to a game that relies on daily habits after having no access to it for 2 months. Since then, we would get one more official tweet announcing the start of the Transcendent Gestal banner, which actually ended like last week, and Timeless Aiona is currently on rerun, which I couldn't even find an announcement for. The replies are all complaints, the patch notes don't even have a reply, and the subreddit is essentially just people asking for the game to be put out of its misery. Was Silver and Blood a fun game? For the time that I and many others spent with it, yes. But with declining quality, lack of balance, lack of substance, the push to make every character Guna material, game modes being abandoned, an entire region being abandoned, and many more issues, people gave up. There's plenty of other side games out there, new gachas are releasing every month, and unfortunately, this game just doesn't hold up anymore. Not because it has outdated systems or the changing trends, but through negligence, incompetence, and a lack of passion for the game. Is Silver and Blood worth playing anymore? Personally, with the current landscape of gacha games, I think you'd be better off playing any other game unless Moonton can somehow have the greatest revival gacha gaming has ever seen. There's a good chance the game won't even reach its 1-year anniversary, let alone see the light of 2027. Unfortunately, this leaves us with a gothic vampire-sized hole in the market, but hopefully another title will one day do what SAB couldn't and take us all back to the moon. So there's a few things I didn't really get into, like the gear system, factioning leveling system, but this is meant to be a deep dive into the history and current failures of the game, not a beginner's guide. I know I kind of died for the last couple months, honestly I was burnt out on CZN. I do plan to make CZN content at some point, but I also want to do more videos like this, or reviewing gacha games. We have NTE around the corner, so content might be a bit weird for a while I figure things out. Also, some people didn't want leaderboards in CZN, and I defended them because of Silver and Blood, where a free-to-play can place top 20 because they could get every unit and dupes weren't needed. But unfortunately, that's not how it works in CZN, so that's why I defended it, but I fully get why people don't like it, and I also don't like how CZN did it, but that is a topic for another day. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Stay safe.